Welcome to Porch Talks. I'm Melissa Bradley, founder of 1863 Ventures and co-founder of New Majority Ventures. This summer, I invited some friends to my porch in Martha's Vineyard. These friends are seasoned leaders, funders, and entrepreneurs who are committed to creating Black wealth. I wanted to talk to them about their experiences, professional and personal. I wanted to go beyond the tips and tricks of starting a business to hear what it feels like to be part of a fast-growing entrepreneurial ecosystem. These folks have a lot to share, and I know they'll inspire you just as much as they inspired me. I am honored, humbled, very nervous about this conversation with my friend and my brother, Karl Carter, who is the CEO of Snake Nation.
Thank you.
A relative, a very prominent civil rights leader in Atlanta, a husband and a dad to two amazing girls. I've had the privilege to know you for or over 30 years.
Yeah.
How would you describe yourself to the world?
Well, first, thank you for allowing me to be here.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And I've watched your ascension, even though you've always been dope.
I appreciate
so I'm super thankful to be here and to see all of the evolution that's happened. I think at my core, I'm a rebel. You know, I like to innovate. I like to do things differently. I love Black people.
Yes.
At my core.
Yep.
And so for me, that's a big part of why I do what I do. It's like, how do we help create opportunities? And I think a lot of that came from the training I got from you and just making sure that whatever we're doing it for the benefit of our people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been a pretty consistent note throughout my career.
Yep.
And now in Snake Nation, it's kind of become my central reason of being, I would say, yeah.
So before we dive into Snake Nation, because you're dressed oh so fine.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
You have always been a cultural icon, and I'm a poke fun for a second though, because your cultural representation has varied. When I first met you,
oh
you
my
had
God,
on,
here we go.
You had on the blue jacket and the starched shirt and the bow tie.
Yes.
And the khakis and the bucks.
Yes.
And then it evolved to some locks.
Yes.
And black.
Yes.
And now we're like all the fancy stuff. How important is what you look like related to how you feel?
I think it definitely matters. Like, I think when you hit those periods, one of the things I think I learned early on as an entrepreneur was like, there are a couple of things that you should just always keep fresh, no matter whatever you're going through, you know, and that helps when you have to sell, that helps when you have to go out and you never know who you're going to meet, where you're going to meet. So I think, you know, it absolutely is just part of how you express yourself. And I remember McGee Williams, who was now is one of the owners of Burrell Communications, but that was my first advertising job out of college. Yep. And Black woman taught me everything I know about new business as it relates to advertising. And I remember I didn't know. I was like, you know, should I wear a suit? You know, what should I do? And I met you. I was in college. You know, now I'm in my mid-20s or whatever at this time. And she was like, don't change a thing. And so she was the first person to kind of be like, there's value in being who you are.
Right.
And I think from that point, man, I just, roll with what felt comfortable. I've been tattooed since I was like 17, but I started going really heavy in my 40s, hands and you name it.
What's your favorite tattoo?
Favorite tattoo?
Because I will never catch up with you. I'm getting there though, but what's your favorite tattoo?
I think my favorite tattoo are the ones I got from my daughters. So I have like a tattoo for Maya here that I got in 2020 because I was stuck in Atlanta and I never missed her birthday.
Okay.
And I missed her birthday. I was not there with her. So I got a tattoo for her on her birthday.
Okay.
And it's a snake. It's a heart with a snake.
Okay.
And it's got Maya Haley in it. And then Zoe Bird, which is across my chest. Mm-hmm. And I got that one in a kitchen in D.C.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, at my goddaughter's.
We would not recommend that, but okay.
I would not recommend that as a way to get tattoos, but thank God it worked out. So for me, it's just always been about self-expression and freedom. Mm-hmm. And then I think people start to realize that you're free for a reason, and I think that's another type of wealth, So I think the freedom is not free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely not free.
Absolutely.
And so, and it benefits other people to see us being free.
Yep.
I think it matters.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you wear, how you choose to come, how you choose to walk in a room, all of it matters.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also sometimes that form of rebellion.
Yeah.
Right? Because they expect you to show up looking one way, and then you're like, boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I had locks. I had locks for 10 years. And so
remember.
by the time I cut my locks, they were like down to my knees. And I remember at the time, you know, I remember being concerned about cutting my locks because, like, what would people think?
Right.
You know, then I was like, nigga, I'm not.
It's my head.
This is my locks.
It's my head.
And so I cut it when it got a mohawk or whatever. And you just start to realize, like, you can't be too attached to these external things.
That's right.
You
I remember the mohawk.
Yeah.
I also remember after you cut your locks, coming to visit you in your house, and you had this dope ass mural.
Yeah, you talking about in DC.
In DC.
Yeah.
So you've always been surrounded by art. Where did that come from?
Oh, man. I just have always, I used to draw when I was little. So I was into art.
Okay.
And I think, you know, a lot of what I do now in creating space for creators, like creating a pathway for other creators, really comes from kind of being a creator myself.
Sure.
And then feeling somewhere in my teens growing up in, you know, murder capital DC, you better be practical.
That's right.
Even though no one ever sat me down, I was like, you need to be practical.
Right.
But I think you just feel it. You know, you just feel it. There is no way with the arts.
Yep.
You know, unless you want to be broke. You know, and for us, the examples were Hustlers and this, that, and the third.
And Disco Dan.
Yeah, Disco Dan. You know, all of those. You know, all of the DC-ness of it all in the 80s and 90s. And so I think, you know, art has always been something I've always loved and I've always appreciated. And, you know, I remember when I first started making a little bit of money, the first thing I did was I bought a piece of art, you know, Eastern Market. And I still have that piece, Chris Demola, Nigerian artist, and it was a water bearer. And it just spoke to me. I'm an Aquarius, so it spoke to me. But yeah, I still have that piece, and I think I bought that piece in, I feel like, 98.
Wow.
That was my first piece of art.
You were ahead of the curve.
You know, I just like what I like, you know. I like what I like, and I wanted to buy things that would last.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I think for me, art, I think now in life, I try to, you know, think about these things also as investments and what I want to leave. Like we have 2 or 3 Fahamu Pekus from 2000. Wow. You know, so because I knew Fahamu and he was in the scene when he was just starting, and we were supporting his art. His art was dope back then, even before he started to be more of a mainstream hot artist that he is now. Like, you know, so we had the benefit of being in his space and just kind of continuing along that path, you know, of seeing and appreciating.
You talked about freedom quite a bit. You have 2 girls.
Yes.
Which is tough.
Yes.
What is the freedom you want them to experience?
You know, it's funny, man. Right when Zoe was going into college, so 2 years ago, I remember she started talking about like her major, and she starts to talk about like, you know, these other majors, you know, because she's been in dance, you know, as you know, like her whole life. Yeah. And so she just, and I could see the practicality creeping in, and I was like, nah. But I could tell she was kind of receiving that from the world. Sure. You know, hey, you better, you know, buckle up. Get a job. And I'm like, you don't have to do that. Yeah. You know, I've been working my whole career as a creative so that it's easier for you. Sure. And so I think, you know, so seeing those girls, my girls, have the freedom to be whatever they want to be without practical worry, you know? So how do you lay foundation so that they don't receive those messages? Like with the work we're doing in Africa, man, you meet some kid and he's like a civil engineer and he's like, but I'm really a photographer, or like, you know, I'm electrical engineer, but I'm really into fashion. So being a creative there is like a dirty secret. Like your parents will think you're crazy. That's right. And so how do we reshape that starving artist narrative, right? Because there's a lot of money in the creative economy, but not so much that comes to the homes and hands of Black creatives. Yeah. And so that's the issue that I want to address. You know, it's like, well, how do we make sure that we own our narratives and do so in a way that allows us to also own the economic process that creates those narratives? Yep. And that's how we benefit, because as we can see, plenty of people benefit from our creativity. Absolutely. Maya is growing up totally free. We're homeschooling. Right. You know, she's in, you know, we live in Cape Town now. Yep. So for the bulk of her life, we've been living in Africa. Yep. And so for us, I think the mental freedom, I like to talk about how, let's say 20% of our brain is occupied with navigating the white world. You know, how can I reclaim that 20%? How can I use that? You know? And so I really want her to see her parents live with no limits. Yep. You know, and I think she feels that. And we decided to homeschool because she was in in a international school,
Sure.
predominantly white institution,
Okay.
and she's coming home, questioning her blackness.
Right.
And
Why does my hair not look like their
Yeah,
hair?
all of that.
Yeah.
And we were like, what?
Right.
And so just being able to, be able to educate her, but also educate other children that don't have the privilege of access to like a private education. Right. And so we started Super School, and really Saida spearheads it at our house,
Nice.
in Cape Town. And so we educate Maya and 2 other girls from Imazama Yetu, which is one of the townships.
Oh, wow.
And so our goal is to help grow that and make that more available to more people, because I think the need for us to take full control of how we educate our children is critical.
Yeah.
Especially when they come home talking about, I don't love my blackness.
Right.
Like, I just found that, we were like, whoa.
Right. That's painful.
Yeah,
That's painful.
especially when you're pro-black. So, you're like, where are you getting this
That's
from?
right.
That's right. So I think that was absolutely a wake-up call.
You realize the greater pressure of the outside world than what they hear in the house.
And now imagine we're in Africa.
Right.
And you're
surrounded.
You're surrounded. And so it's interesting because we've been like at people's houses, different houses up here. And, some of the young people are talking about the benefits of being in Jack and Jill. Mm-hmm. And it always starts off, well, I'm one of the only black kids in my, And so growing up in D.C., that was never our experience. So Chocolate City.
You were the majority.
Yeah, we were good.
Right.
But, I can only imagine what that must be like, and when you go into corporate, and Saida spent, my wife spent 20-something years in corporate America. And so, having to thrive in those environments. So while the entrepreneurial struggle is one thing,
right.
I think all the struggles are valid.
Yep.
Because everyone's going through, maybe that's the type of struggle you choose.
Right.
I wouldn't choose that for me. We have our own struggles in order to be free. But I think everyone has whatever they're willing to go through to get, to get ahead.
Yeah.
And so I think, Africa has to be in our lexicon. It has to be in our options, in our solution set. Because we can't ignore where we come from.
Yep.
It's such a source of power.
Yep.
It's hard to describe it, but imagine a world where like people love your blackness.
That's right.
And every president is black, and
That's
everything is black, and it's black people on the money, and I mean just everything that affirms you.
Right.
That's invaluable.
Yep.
That's freedom.
So I've known you for 30 years.
Wow.
I met you
met me when I was 5.
Okay, I got you. That's right. You were a baby. You were a
small
baby
child
genius. You were a baby genius. So you had GTM.
Yeah.
And then that evolved to many other things we can talk about, and then it's resulted in Snake Nation. Talk about, to me, the recurring theme is preserving and promoting the culture. But what is GTM, and what was your biggest takeaway there?
Oh,
what does it literally mean, and what did it mean to you? Yeah.
So the funny story is when we started GTM, it was summer of 2000, and at the time, the record that was blazing the airwaves was Slum Village, Get This Money. Yep. And so that was the original meaning of GTM. It was get this money, because we were young black dudes, inspired by hip hop culture and the whole nine. But we started to really realize it was so much more than that, and so GTM actually became a fluid identity, and it was a big finger to the industry, to all the acronym boring companies. Yep. So the official name was GTM. It means a lot. Yep. And my GTM was, I think it's been Guerrilla Takeover Manifesting to, Ghost in the Machine, and part of our interview process will be what's your GTM? And that was our surprise question. And so we would use it to see how quickly people could think on their feet. And so GTM was this fluid identity, and it was meant to show we don't have to be stale and boring to be effective, and a lot of the techniques we perfected then and identifying talent, employing young people, we have ported now into the society model for Snake Nation. Yep. So same sort of understanding of young people's talents, how to cultivate young people, how to work with them. We really grew up there doing that and just applying those skill sets. And then Truth, for those that don't know, was the largest social campaign ever aimed at young people. It was a multi-billion-dollar campaign. Yep. And so, and I was on the original pitch team for that. And I'm a year and a half out of college, and so it was just a lot. Yep. It was a lot at once. All a blessing. Some of it, even the difficult parts a blessing. We worked on that campaign for 12 years, and we were around for 15.
Wow.
And we worked with Diageo for 10 of those 15. So we had a really long standing run as a group of, young entrepreneurs that were not in New York at the epicenter of advertising, but were just really on this rebel shop. And I think we've always had this kind of rebel energy of just doing things, the way we saw them to be done, and how culture was actually moving and not how people thought they moved in boardrooms, because we would be, out all night at nightlife stuff, and then the next day we're in the office.
Yeah, sure would be.
Yeah.
But
that's where it happens.
It's like 4 o'clock. We're going to get a nap before you start at 9.
Listen, man, but what you realize is like so much of that be like, I'll see you at 2 a.m. and we're going to talk business.
Which I can attest to.
Which happen all the time.
I could definitely attest
I'll
to
see
that.
you at the spot later, boom.
Yeah.
So there's a whole thing that happens at night that has real value, and that some of these people, that's how the culture moves.
Out of the confines of 4 walls.
Yeah, and that's why you got to be there. There's no replacement for physically being there, and I think as you get older, you be more selective on where you are. Sure. But really, it's about having your hands in places. So I like to think about in my later years being more like a Kaiser Soze for culture. Like you might be dealing with somebody that's associated with me, but maybe you don't know it's me.
Right.
And that's okay. Like, everything is not about being out front.
Right.
A lot of it is about being like, hey, how do we make sure that people have the platform?
And that's definitely what you're doing now. You're putting other people on. You bring up that business, and then, of course, I have to think about all the other brothers.
Yes.
Darius,
Kimbo, Sean, Courtney.
Woo, what a group.
Absolutely.
Courtney. I still talk to Courtney.
Yeah.
What was that like, having a business with your friends?
Challenging. It was challenging. I probably couldn't be a proper CEO for 7 of those years, I would say. We were consensus-based. And I remember there being a point I was like, guys, this ain't working like that. And, I think people could see that. Yeah. I think, I have a natural knack for new business. Yep. I've always had that knack. And so that was important. But when it comes to managing a company, that's only part of the equation. Technically, a chief revenue officer could do that and not have to lead the company. And so for me, I just learned a lot, man. I was like 27 when I started that company. I was super young. I graduated college at 25, So, and when I met you, I was working for a living. That's why I was in that. But, I would take off that tie suit.
I know that's right.
You know what I'm saying?
I watch you cross the street like, here comes Carl.
Here comes Carl.
He's going to be undressed when he gets in the office. Here you come.
No, it's so funny because people don't know how long I've known you.
Right.
I'm like, bro, you don't understand. This woman helped me write my very first business plan. Yes. We needed every help we could get. Because, you're doing this and you're just figuring out as you go along.
But you're also young.
Yeah. I mean, we're young, we're dumb, all of the things, and we had a lot of hustle, a lot of success out the gate, a lot of ups and downs early. But overall, I mean, when you talk about those years, I mean, there has not been another us since then.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And a lot of the people in culture now, we gave them their first jobs. Sure. We identified the talent. And so we built that, we were street promoters. I mean, we grew up in streets, in culture, in nightlife. And to make the leap, we weren't ad guys. Yeah. We were culture guys.
But you were not just culture guys, you were truth tellers.
Yeah.
No pun intended, but when you came and you said, we're doing the truth campaign, I think to me, that was probably one of your happier moments because you were selling something you actually believed in.
Yeah. I mean, but it's also like I think it's addictive to use your talents for impact. And you don't have the language because you're young, and it's like, oh, we're launching with $1 million client. Like, who's doing that? Right. I mean, out the gate, and so, but then next year you'd be like, oh, wait, they cut their budgets. Woo, so it's like it's highs, the lows, all of the things, But I wouldn't trade it for anything. Yeah. And it was such an education. Yep. That campaign was in the American Journal of Medicine for saving like 100,000, 200,000 teen lives. Yeah. And so once you do stuff like that, then you start to realize like, well, I don't want to squander this channel I've got. Yep. So if I've got a channel, because people think marketing is about like moving, products, and it's actually about influence. That's right. It's about, and if you're in a place where you're
people
sharing,
feel something, because you make people feel something, good, bad, or indifferent.
Good, bad, or indifferent, right. And it's been interesting because it's like Snake Nation really came out of a space of wanting to give back, and really realizing like, yo, I've had the benefit of being a creator my whole life. Right. Very few people have that benefit, and to like make a good living at it. And so how do we change that? And what we did, so we did a show with Smirnoff back in the GTM days called Master of the Mix, and it was. We broke all type of records with that, from, 500 million PR impressions in our 3rd season to having Smirnoff as a brand, global brand, up 20%, right. And so we were proving, on all levels. And what we really found was like it didn't matter because at the end of the day, people get promoted.
That's right.
Other people come in, not my
right.
baby.
Right.
Right? Doesn't matter what you're doing.
Right. Switch it up.
And so, we had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
And I think coming out of that, again, when you think you're like, I'm at the pinnacle,
right.
We have a show on television sponsored by a client. Network doesn't own it. We own rights in it. You know how hard it is to own rights in your work as a marketer? Right. Incredibly difficult. Right. That was a 1 in 100 deal, and we negotiated that deal. And so coming out of that, I was like, how do we scale that?
Right.
How do we take that 1% and then build platforms that allow more people to participate in the deal flow, more people to participate in the negotiating ability.
And that's Snake Nation.
And that's Snake Nation. And that really was the impetus, was like, this ain't enough.
Right.
And, you wind up being just, like I said, you're a glorified salesperson.
Yep.
I got 10 things in the chamber. Let me show you what I'm doing. Like, it's too much.
And half of them won't come out.
And half of them, like, a lot of them won't come out.
Right.
A lot of them won't come out, And so you really start to realize, like, there's just no power in that. And, we're about power.
Yep.
We're about tangible, real, generational wealth and power. Yep. Do what matters. Do what stands the test of time.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to go from Africa to ATL for a second.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
As you were talking, I automatically said, I know Maynard Jackson is proud. I know he is. I know he is.
Appreciate it.
Talk about your uncle.
Man, why are you going to do this?
Well, who is he to the world and who was he to you? Because I met him several times.
Right.
But the first time I had a real conversation with him was with you.
Yeah.
You were like, yo, come to ATL. Like, come on, I got to run this errand. I was like, oh, Lord, am I going to get in trouble? Like, what errand is this going to be? And we showed up at an office building, and I was like, I don't think I'm dressed appropriately. You were like, come on. And there was Maynard, feeling like 10 feet tall.
Yeah, no.
And he was like, hey, I know about you, Carl's friend. And I was like, huh.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, like, so my uncle was an amazing man. Like, the bar is so high. Like,
yep.
And I think it's when you talk about like black leadership, leadership period. I mean, the dude is like excellent.
Right. That's right.
But when you talk about the bar he set for black leadership, it's still aspirational for most of our leaders, and I'll say that full stop.
Yep.
I mean, somebody whose mission it was to create economic opportunity for black people. That was his thing.
That's right. He would rather not see the airport built.
Yes.
Unless black people are going to get those contracts.
And did it.
That's right.
And I think the quote was, grass will grow.
That's right.
Grass will grow.
That's right.
And so, it's interesting when you talk about his role, John Wesley Dobbs, his grandfather, Maynard Jackson Sr., his father, and just that track record, of black leadership. And so absolutely, you start to be like, well, okay, what are you doing?
Right.
With your life.
Right. The mirror goes, hello.
Hello. And I think for me, that really resonated. And I think about him a lot, because to lose him was it was
a big deal.
Big deal. Yep. And it was one of those things, too, because I grew up in D.C., so, it was different. If I had grown up in Atlanta, it probably would have been a different life for me, right? But we grew up in D.C. like everybody else. And we dealt with all of the things that comes from being in murder capital and, seeing friends die and go to jail and crack and that whole thing. We were right there front and center for that. And so it would be interesting to leave that where the only people who we saw that had wealth were drug dealers. Right. And then to go to Atlanta, and it's like, even then, like kids with Range Rovers and this, the black people. So between Atlanta and L.A., my dad's side of the family, because my grandfather was like, a self-made millionaire, Chicago Depression era, ran numbers, got into the Army, worked his way up, graduated from dental school, was the dentist for the Tuskegee Airmen.
Whoa.
So
the one doctor they could trust.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it was one of those things where I had these examples of black excellence, But my dad was a civil rights attorney. My mother was a teacher, So like, it was just, we just had a different reality. And so I think for me, he was just always my uncle. Yeah. And it literally, throughout life, I think when we started GTM, when we started our first company, we were open for 3 years before he knew
what y'all were doing.
Yeah, because I was like, I'm not coming to,
right.
He's
like, what's this little street?
Yeah, what's this? He shows up one day, he's in the lobby. They're like, Carl, your uncle's in the lobby. I'm like, And so, but he was so proud,
Yep.
you know.
Of course he was.
Yeah, he was very proud, and he was, grooming me. You know, he was definitely like, I've sat in rooms with him, and seen him talk to political leaders. I'm not gonna name no names,
Right.
but I remember one time being in L.A. and like being at a prominent person's house for dinner. And he's like, hits L.A. I'm living in L.A. at the time. He's like, come to dinner with me. So I go to dinner with him, and and they're basically pressing him to come back to politics. He had now, it was no longer mayor. It exited. I'm just, whatever, in my 20s. I'm just listening, and he's like, I don't have to do nothing but stay black and die.
There you go. There you go.
And so, even to see, like, even at those heights, there's still just a lot that we're not comfortable with in our own power.
Yep.
Even those that have power.
Right.
And that's why I think Africa matters.
Right.
Because we talk about power. It's interesting, like with Roe versus Wade, we talk about power. And one of the most interesting articles I wrote about was like, we got too heavy on soft power. Whereas Republicans were more focused on judges and the laws around that. And so that whole maneuvering, I mean, how many years are we going to go into with this Supreme Court?
Right.
Even with the first black woman Supreme Court
right.
justice, we are still in an uphill battle in this
Right.
country. It cannot be our only thought process.
What do you
and
mean
our
by
solution
soft
set.
power?
Well, in a sense, cultural power.
Okay.
Right? So there was a lot of celebrations about first woman this, first woman that. And so there was a lot of like more celebrations of soft power. Yeah, oneness, recognition.
Yep.
But realizing like that's not enough.
Yep.
And they're not concerned about that. They'll do backdoor dealings, and then boom, now here we go. And so I look at these things and, I think about him, and I think a lot of times about like, what would it be like if he was alive?
Mm-hmm. Because people don't, it's funny how many people don't even know him. Because like, oh, Barack, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he was the president. I said, but there have been many black leaders who have uplifted states and communities. Yeah. I mean, Maynard was an icon for the country. Yeah. Because he, like Barack, was one of the few that didn't get in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about, his ethical track record,
stellar.
Bar none, stellar. And not only that, what I also found sort of over the years was that the Atlanta city policies became blueprint for black economic empowerment for South Africa. And so the policies that he initiated there have had widespread impact because a lot of people from his administration were also early consultants. Sure. And there was a strong connection between South Africa and Atlanta. Right. I mean, him and Nelson Mandela were very tight. Wow. And so he's a world leader, And so that's the thing I think, when I'm kind of, again, assessing my later years, what are you going to do? Right. I think, when you start to be like, well, I've been a creator for 30 years, like, and earned a living and done well and kids in college, the whole nine, like what responsibility do you have?
What's your proudest personal moment?
Daughters. Easy. And really, man, seeing them just grow,
They're beautiful.
Oh my God. I mean,
I remember when Zoe was born, just got here.
What?
Oh, I was like
30 years old.
Oh, yep.
You talk about wake up call.
Right.
Total wake up call. Young Karl was like, what?
Right. At first, the call came and it went to voicemail because you weren't trying to hear it. I remember.
No, listen, it was wild because you had, I think when Zoe was, because Zoe came like 3 weeks early. So I had to rush back to L.A. We drove all night to get there the next morning to be there. And she came following day. And, again, it's like, I think the first time I got a glimpse of why kids matter was when my younger brother had his first son. And I remember being deathly afraid of kids. I was not here for the kids. One day, but as an entrepreneur, I'm like, I don't need anything that's going to take me off my game. And being one of four and seeing my parents struggle as independent people. Right. My dad has always been independent. I was like, nah. But then when my nephew was born, I remember walking around the office with him, first GTM office, and holding him, and it being like really, just resonated. Like,
sure,
this is why you're doing this.
That's right. Legacy, man, right there.
Legacy. And so that was the first sort of aha moment. And then, when Zoe was born, that was like ridiculous. It totally changed my entire perspective on what I was doing and why. Yep. And then Maya as well. My kids are 10 years apart. Yep. And so Karl at 30 is very different from Karl at 40, but a lot of the same things resonate.
Sure.
Yeah, a lot of the same things resonate. So, you know, it's that desire to give them freedom.
Yep.
You know, at the end of the day, like, see us being free.
Yep.
See the whole thing. You know, Zoe saw all of the ups and downs.
Yeah.
And see, you know, all of it. And it's not pretty sometimes.
Right.
But it's all necessary.
Yeah.
And so I hoped at the time that you know, she was seeing something that would give her confidence in her ability to do whatever she wants to do. And so I think that's the best thing we can do, you know. And I think oftentimes we worry about our kids seeing struggle, you know. But whether that you work somewhere 20 years and all of a sudden you hit a ceiling,
Right.
that's a struggle.
Right.
You know, whether or not, you know, you're being passed over because you're black or you're a woman or you're, you know, in a queer community, whatever it is that is limiting you is also a struggle.
Yeah.
Just because, you know, you're in Connecticut and, you know, you're in private school don't mean that your parents are somewhere being like, what in the hell
That's right.
is going on?
That's right, because they're struggling behind the scenes.
Because they're struggling behind the scenes with their own, whatever their struggle is.
Right.
And maybe you're not even financially struggling, but you're spiritually struggling, you're mentally struggling, right? All of those things play out. Nobody has an extension that looks like this, even the ones that we celebrate so heavily.
Right. There's always a story.
Always a story.
Always a story.
Always a story. And so, you know, when you talk about the heavyweights in tech and, you know, it's like, I just got tired of reading business books where all they talk about is the, you know, fantastic struggles of white men. I'm like, bruh, we have to really, you know, have these people that we can celebrate and so that people can look at us and be like, yo, this is possible.
Yeah.
And at the time, we were all in street shit. Like, everybody was doing everything at the time, you know. You had jobs, you hustled, you did parties, you did everything you could to make it. And, you know, I think that drive as an entrepreneur, you know, you just can't replace that. That's something, that's a skill set that never goes away. Yeah. And I found that again when I moved to Africa. You know, where now I don't have a company anymore. I'm launching a startup. You know, I'm not this established person. Nobody knows me.
Well, right, they think you're a rapper.
They think I'm a rapper. I probably should sign a record deal.
If you're a little tall, they would have said you played NBA.
I know exactly.
See?
Exactly.
You got to grow a little bit.
Yeah,
you got to grow a
exactly.
little bit.
Well, that ship has sailed.
I know.
Yeah.
But I want to say thank you. Truly,
you.
thank you for coming to the porch.
Thank you. Thank you.
Love you.
Love you too.
That's it.
Thank
It's
you.
over.